and welcome everyone back to Modeling Clinic number 3. We have quite a few challenges for the 15 minutes we have, so I would say we dive right in and try to keep things to maybe 12 minutes per challenge to see how many we can get through. And we're going to start with Andre.
Thank you. I'll share this thing, see if I can get it to come back up again.
Yes.
So in short, we talked about Metabase earlier on today, so I won't do that. What we want to model is how grant applications, the projects and events that get funded through these, how those are connected, and primarily from the context of Wikimedia affiliates and their applications, but in a way that is compatible with what exists on Wikidata today, to the extent that that's possible, and that doesn't sort of limit this to just worst case scenario, just Wikimedia Sweden and how we work, or just chapters without also being able to work for other actors. We sort of started from the point of view of grant applications, where we have the issue that to the extent that applications are modeled on Wikidata today, they're normally focused either on the grant itself, so the grant scheme itself, or to the projects that get financed by this, which are, from a relevance point of view, of course, natural. We are interested in applications because we see that there's a value also in applications that don't get funding, like being able to describe those and being able to get ideas from those. So that is sort of where we started this, trying to figure out how and what can we say about this, and then how can we connect this to properties and similar things that already exist on Wikidata today. And for this particular space, these are sort of the properties that we found there today. I don't know how the exact setup has been on the modeling clinics.
So basically, you come with questions and an issue you have, and we try to help collectively.
So then I guess the base question is, how can we model the applications in a way that allows us to tie them to the resulting projects? Ideally, by not inventing a gazillion new properties, but being able to keep close to what's on Wikidata today. That is sort of the key thing. Any helpful suggestions around that? And also how we would model something like whether an application is successful or not, which is normally sort of Boolean values, which are not supported.
Susanna asked if there's a modeling documentation page, and they already linked that.
Yes, I did. But there's not one specifically for applications, or for the financial bit of the applications, because we haven't sort of landed in that.
Right. So my first thought is that a lot of the grant modeling we have probably comes from the wiki site corner of Wikidata. Yeah. I'm not sure if anyone of the people who could speak to that is here. Maybe. Doesn't look like it. But that might definitely be a good group of people to ask some more, I would say. Does anyone else have other recommendations?
I mean, so a very concrete question that we have is, to what extent people feel that you can say something along the lines of this application is is the immediate cause of the funded program or the funded project. The other one is, I don't think there's anything on Wikidata that essentially talks about the size of the grants, or if you talk about co-financing, like how you would even get that into that as well.
Jane is saying this is a bit like the difference between a preprint and published paper, no? And Susanna's, I think, making the model as perfect as possible and pinpointing the problems would probably be helpful. And you specifically called out immediate cause of, right?
Yeah, so that's one of the ways that we've seen we could connect the application to the product, of saying the funded project. Had a vague idea that you could possibly use instance of to model success of it. So like it's an instance of a successful application, or it's an instance of a rejected application. Like that could be a way to catch that, and then there are all subclasses of grant applications. And in part, we've tried not to pre-model this too much, because we know that we would then end up inventing our own properties, since it's on a different wiki.
Yeah.
Funding requested, received. Yeah, that's actually Susanna's comment about distinguishing how much you get as well. And in an application, very often that checks what you're asking for. What you actually end up receiving in the end, I'd say, is like if we look at the actual funded project, that might end up getting more money or less money because of circumstances, of course.
Yeah.
But using instance of to handle sort of the states of it, is that something people have experimented with? For these sort of, I mean, it's not binary as someone pointed out, but sort of, or you're trying to capture the status of something.
So I can't quite put my finger on it, but immediate cause of smells a bit.
Yeah.
And have you thought about a dedicated property for it?
Of course, that is always a solution, but it's like only if we're absolutely sure that whatever is on Wikidata is not useful to us.
I mean, also on Wikidata. I mean, because there are more grants than just these on Wikidata as well, right?
Yeah. So the thing, we haven't seen anything about the actual applications of Wikidata. Like it's always, an application is normally considered sort of or the link is normally between the funded project and the grant that funded it. And I guess unsuccessful applications very rarely meet notability criteria.
Okay. Frederick saying, I would not instantiate a grant. It would be better to have a property where the organization receiving the grant or the project is the subject and the grant is the object.
I'm not sure I follow that.
So Wikimedia Sweden receives a grant, whatever the grant is called, I guess.
So I think the issue there is that if the focus here is on Wikimedia affiliates, then everything they do is connected to the loads and loads of very small grants that they receive. And very often a grant is not for all of the work of the affiliate, but it's for a specific project or something. Or a specific grant request. 8324. And I think that also doesn't really capture the unsuccessful applications, because then there's no grant received.
Yeah, PA324, that's funder.
Yeah. Maybe we can switch and look at, if you look at the resulting project instead.
Sure.
And that has various sources of funding. What some of them might be coming from this grant or from its funder. Yes, I can open a slide for comments. Could you do that, Alicia?
What?
Open a slide for comments.
Yeah. Where?
So the resulting project, in part, it has the bit that comes straight from the application, like that gives you funding from some source. It might then, in the end, go over budget anyway, so the final cost might be bigger. The final monies might come from more instantaneous that. And there are a few more things existing on Wikidata that's relevant to that.
You can comment on the slides now.
Yeah, you can say comments straight in the slide as well. I'll stick the slides on comments later, but and here it's the same situation. It's very often a connection between the funded project and the grant scheme, and on what's on Wikidata today. It's also a bit different. So Jane said you can just use rejected. Would you? Where would you suggest putting that claim? Or as a qualifier on the funder here?
And completely on properties. You can also handle various statuses and track them that way. You have to think about how you query. That's part of the modeling process. So as long as you have one tracking thing that enables you to always find your data back, then it's easier to model using very generic properties. Significant event is hugely generic. It's used for all kinds of stuff.
But that would be a good way to capture whether it was rejected or extended or anything like that as well, of course.
Yeah, or even if it's connected to something else, you could actually have a significant event where actually two applications have been conjoined, right? Because they've decided that they're actually doing overlapping things. So it's very flexible in that sense. Whereas has immediate cause sounds like it's something very desperate or something.
That was sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel of what already existed. And I guess you can even use significant events to draw the connection between the funded project and the application, because the application might receive funding, but in the end, the project never starts because of unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, or it gets canceled halfway because it just doesn't deliver, or people have different conclusions about what it's supposed to achieve. All sorts of things happen. So using qualifiers for significant event, you can probably capture a lot of these moments that you want to track later on.
That's a really valuable, valuable input.
Jan is also suggesting to have a look at budgets that are already modeled on Wikidata, and plenty of them do use immediate cause of. And my suggestion would be, as one of the other next steps, to get in touch with the Wikisite people, maybe in Wikiproject source metadata, and ask them if they have some settled grant scheme that you can build up on as well. And I wouldn't shy away from also suggesting some additional properties on Wikidata if that's going to be useful for you.
Yeah, no, that's all really useful suggestions.
Cool.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Then I suggest we move on to our next modeling challenge for the day and see what we can do there. And we're gonna go to Ursula with Wiki Project African Literature Metadata.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
So now you see the Wikidata item, I guess. So yeah, I'm involved in a project that is called African Literary Metadata. It is a project that strives to uncover African literary forms that are very popular on the African continent, but highly invisible globally because they are rarely cataloged in library catalogs. And think of literary forms such as spoken word poetry, street theater, Facebook novels, TikTok poetry. And the first literary form we are working on is serialized fiction. Serialized fiction are literary works that are published in smaller and sequential installments in magazines or newspapers, and in recent years also on web blogs or on social media channels. And I would like to share two examples with you. One of a work of serialized fiction published in a newspaper, and one work of serialized fiction published on the web. I would like to share my thoughts on and questions, and I would be very happy to receive feedback via email or in the chat or in the notes. So the first example you see is the serialized is a serialized edition of a Swahili novel written by Mina Gansel, and this novel has been published in installments in a Kenyan newspaper and Taifa Newsly. So for me, you see, I've chosen an instance of version, edition, or translation to describe this work of serialized fiction, because I very much feel that serialized fiction is an edition of a literary work, but I also want to be able to retrieve all serialized fiction that I'm describing, and that's why I added a second value to the property. That's why I added serialized fiction. I was also thinking about probably splitting that in two and using two properties, instance of version, edition, and translation, and moving serialized fiction to the genre property. But at present, this solution feels more appropriate for my purposes. And yeah, then we have the title field and edition of translation of, which will link to the literary work, author, and language of the work. So these are not special, but probably we can have a look together at the publication date field, because in this example, the novel is published in 18 installments, and it started publishing. The first installments were published in 1969, and the publication ended in 1970. So I wondered if I modeled the publication date in the right way, or if there are better ways to show that the novel started being published in 1969 and ended being published in 1970. And I also choose to add the property distribution format, because I would very much like to retrieve serialized fictions that is printed, but therefore I also would like to be able to retrieve serialized fiction that is born digital, that is being published on a website. So that's why I introduced the property distribution format. And in this example, we were lucky that the newspaper was already digitized by the Modern Endangered Archives program. So that's why I added full work available at. And yeah, this is the way I modeled the issue field. So we have 18 installments, and I guess 18 installments is 18 parts. It's just a little bit too much to add all 18 parts, so I decided to add the first and the last one. I added the issue and issue number, the pages, and I marked which is the first and which is the last installment. So I very much feel comfortable, rather comfortable with the modeling of serialized fiction that is published in a newspaper. I feel less comfortable modeling a serialized fiction that is published on the web. And the second example is such an example of serialized fiction that is published on the web. It's a popular novel published in South Africa, The Diary of a Zulu Girl, and it was first published in WordPress. So I actually choose then 3 properties, the version, edition, and translation. I again choose the serialized fiction, and to indicate that it is published on the web, I choose the value blog fiction. But I guess I will soon delete the choice I made. I will soon delete blog fiction, as I'm the only one using blog fiction in the property instance of. I guess I will rather change to web fiction, which is used more often on items in Wikidata. And then it's, yeah, we have again have the title, edition of, author, language, publication date. But what's interesting, I would just focus on the 2 last properties. In this case, a full work available at URL. I'm not quite sure if this is the right property to use, because when I had a look at other items that describe web fiction, they would rather use official website and not full work available at. And on all the items I've seen that are instances of web fiction, the property published in is rarely used. So I ask myself if this is the right property to use, published in, to describe a work of web fiction. So these are my 2 examples and use cases. So I very much welcome your feedback, either in the chat or in notes or via email. And if there are Wikidatans who are also interested in modeling web fiction, so I would be very pleased to get in contact with them. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I have one comment real quick.
Yes, please.
Yeah. For the web fiction,
yeah,
why would you use version? Because there's only one version.
Yeah, but I use version because, let's say, you have the literary work, and the serialized fiction is then one version of the novel. The fiction maybe later also be published as a book, and then I have a second edition and a second version.
But it's not the same thing if it's a book.
No, it's not the same thing indeed. So if it's a book, let's say my model is you have an item for the literary work, and to this item you will attach an edition.
I think version is meant for the same instance of. It's not meant for different instances of.
Okay.
Yeah, because on the web you only have one URL, so that it seems a bit overkill.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Jane. Does anyone else have input? on this. Hannah in the chat is asking for your email to get in touch.
I will send her my email.
Cool. Frederick.
The serialized version to the original work with based on?
No, it's linking to the original, to the literary work by using addition of translation of, and then oh, you can't see anything because I stopped sharing. Sorry, I will share again. I can show you.
So it is really the same work.
Yeah, it's the same work.
Okay.
It is. Let's say you have both cases. You have the identical work. So it's the literary work is identical with the version published in the newspaper or published on the web, and you also have cases in which only part of the original literary work is published in the newspaper or published on the web. For example, in you have there are examples that you have just part of the original work or the first 12 chapters, for example, being published. But you find both.
Okay.
Cool. Then if anyone has more input for Ursula, please let her know either via email or in the chat. And I suggest we move on to James, who also has a problem for us to talk about. James, do you want to tell us what it is?
No, sorry. Sorry, trying to do two screens at once. So this is a query I've put in the chat. I don't know if everyone can run the query, and then you can see what I'm talking about. This is a query that looks for classes that are a subclass or in the subclass tree, both of material item, material entity, and abstract entity. And one of the most fundamental things we ought to be able to do for any object in Wikipedia, in Wikidata, is to know whether the thing we're talking about actually is concrete and realized or whether it's abstract. And as you can see from the query results, if any of you've got this up yet, in an awful lot of cases, it goes wrong because we're saying items are both. So the first ones of these, for instance, a type of Messerschmitt plane, we're saying it's a sort of aircraft, so it's a physical thing. It's also an example of an abandoned project, so it's been made a subclass of that as well. And so this is a problem I think we need to deal with. I think in some cases, I've said in the Etherpad, why this comes around is that we're thinking of a class in two ways at once, as a collection of things that are concrete, but also a class as a container of things, and the idea of the containing things is abstract. And so in our minds, maybe we see this two ways at once, and this is where some of the confusion comes. But if we think of what the rule for a subclass is, the fundamental rule of a subclass is that a class A should only be a subclass of a class B if every instance of A can also be said to be an instance of that superclass B. So if you've got a physical item like an aeroplane, which is a member of your class, there's no way that that class should be subclass to abstract entity if that class is including things like physical planes. So there's clearly something that's wrong here. It's not a single problem, so it's not something we're going to solve in 5 minutes in this. But ideally, I think we could discuss why the issue arises a bit, or what possible ways there are forward. I think probably it needs a HIT team to get together and agree, a small group of volunteers that are simply going to go through the list and generate more queries like this, and case by case looking at each of them to try and resolve why we're getting the things both being included as a subclass of something that's concrete and a subclass of something that's abstract. Does anyone want to come back and say whether that's making any sense?
It makes sense, but I think you're wishing for the moon, because this is a lot like the same problem we were just discussing with the Swedish applicants, right? So some applications are successful and others are not.
Right.
If you have a successful airplane, it is an airplane. But if you have fragments of an airplane because that Messerschmitt fell down and is buried in some polder somewhere, then that's still an airplane, or it was an airplane at some point in its existence. So you get into this philosophical discussion of what is an airplane. And I think the architectural designs and plans to make an airplane are equal to the remains underground. But the idea of having a finite hierarchy that separates abstract things from physical things, I don't think we're ever going to be there. I'm not sure we really want to be there, because there's this question of time, which changes the idea of the thing from concrete to abstract and the other way around. We know of remains. We don't actually even know where they're located, but they must be somewhere over the North Sea, for example. You know, it's an abstract concept, really.
I mean, there are some of these that are clearly wrong. Animate object shouldn't ever be a subclass of abstract entity, surely. It might be an instance of an abstract entity, but it shouldn't be a subclass. A class called animate object shouldn't be a subclass of abstract entity.
Yeah. Have you talked to Andrew Lee? He collects a whole series of these circular impossible conditions in subclasses. And this, what do we call it? Subclassing party. We could have a subclassing party for pretty much any instance of you would desire. I think airplane's probably a good one.
Well, I think this query is quite useful because it does give this particular divide between abstract and material. And if you look at down those list of abstract classes in the last column, each of those is probably a case that needs to be looked at to understand what is the best way forward. And maybe we do need some third one, which is a superclass that can have both abstract and concrete instances. But in most cases, we ought to be able to make the division that, I mean, a sports award, for instance, if we've got, is that a concrete thing or an abstract thing?
Yeah. Are you aware of the Wiki project ontology? Because especially your query seems right in their corner.
Yeah, I've submitted it twice on the talk page to
Okay.
the Wiki ontology project over the last 3 years.
They probably saw you coming, James.
Essentially had no feedback or very limited feedback.
Okay.
It needs a small team that are determined to work through this and fix this, and who are going to discuss it with themselves.
I love your tenacity. I'm not sure if I'm ready to help you with this. It's just such a huge, all-encompassing project. That's the problem.
Well, there's only about 400 classes on this list. That, in terms of fixing things, is definitely doable. I'm surprised it's not more, but that's looking at, it's finding 100,000 classes that are subclass of material entity and 100,000 that are subclasses of abstract entity, and looking to see which appear in both lists.
Yeah, the issue is I'd rather watch paint dry. That's the issue.
But maybe someone else here is very excited about that. Peter.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that really bugs me about Wikidata is it's really hard. I mean, I'm want to get general information out of Wikidata, and things like this drive me mad because I look at Messerschmitt's ME 408 and I say, if ever I wanted to find abstract objects and I have actual airplanes showing up as instances of abstract object, that's just wrong. I mean, it's completely and utterly wrong. And the problem here, as far as I can tell, is this is now really the genesis of this particular problem is a subclass instance mix-up. I mean, Messerschmitt ME 408 should be an instance of whatever it is, abandoned project. It's not a subclass of abandoned project. And if you did that, then you'd fix the problem, I think.
Well, until we get to abandoned proposed road. Well, is that a road and an abandoned project? It is a class. In that case, it's a class of item because you get lots of different roads.
Right. So, but this is the problem, is that somehow somebody's got to go through each and every one of these and find where the incorrect modeling is. And this one is, to me, this one is dead obvious. Some of them are not quite so obvious. I saw this in ships all over the place. There were many ships, actual representations of actual physical ships that were subclasses of something. So, the SS Ronald Reagan is not a subclass of aircraft carrier. It's an instance of aircraft carrier. But these kinds of subclass instance mix-ups show up all over the place. Even, Lydia had it listed as one of the top problems in Wikidata modeling. And part of the issue is that in my opinion, the guidance on when to use what is too weak. And there's nothing that leaps out at you when you make the fact that Messerschmitt is an instance, a subclass of abandoned project. Because the upper level ontology is either too weak or the guidance is not good enough to tell you when you're making a mistake.
So this is why I thought if there was a HIT team that went through this and left a record of its discussions and identified the patterns and anti-patterns that turn up, then that would be a way to try and bootstrap that better guidance or better understanding of the cases involved.
Lydia's categorization has a bunch of these. And mixing up subclass and instance of is one of them. And, why does this happen so much? I mean, as a kind of professional ontologist, I don't have well, that's not true. I rarely have a problem figuring out which is which. But some people do have a problem, and it's unclear why. I mean, one could postulate a whole bunch of reasons why. I mean, I would find it actually interesting if somebody would do a sociological study to find out why, but I don't think that's in the cards.
All right. How do we move forward with this? James, your query looks very useful as a starting point. Peter, you're also very knowledgeable and very excited about the problem. Maybe that's the start?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a start. The trouble is that all of these things where we get people who could be doing better things with their time to go and fix up all of the problems seems to me the wrong way around. We should be trying to do more to prevent the problems from occurring in the first place. And, yes, we do have to fix up the problems, but, I would much prefer to work on tools to help prevent the problems.
Fair. Okay, James, promise from me, I will solve one issue on your query.
That's great. Thanks.
Maybe someone else can do similar, and then we get through this list. Cool. We have 10 minutes. I think it would be amazing if we can squeeze in one more challenge. And And that would bring us to Susanna. Susanna, do you want 10 minutes?
Yes, this is I'm coming, trying to make it in time. Okay. I displayed presented my problem in the previous session, or like in the morning, and I would like to link to it as well from here. Gosh, I wasn't ready. And show you the problem as a slide. Here we go. We are soon ready. There. And I'm sharing my screen. There. So my question is also quite generic. We have we have a, oh, now it's a small one. Oh gosh, it doesn't matter. Or maybe it does. Sorry.
Let's just leave it, I think.
Okay. I will do it anyway. Sorry. Explaining it because, yeah. So to be able to make links to an item in an inventory, we have all the data on Wikidata, but to be able to make links to that specific item in that specific inventory in the best possible language, we need to model it in some specific way, which is not known to me so far. And for example, well, it can be inside the designation statement. There is this specific 3259 property that can have qualifiers, or it can be an independent statement, but the independent statement loses the connection to the designation. So continuing the line of thought that we should put it in the qualifiers, then what would be the qualifiers? We have a title, the property title that is monolingual and can have the language, and alternatives are subject name as which is not monolingual, and official name which is monolingual and could be used instead. But for the link to put in the qualifiers, there's no way to state the language of that link because it is not included in the data type. And then also now these both would be connected to the initial.
Suzanne, I just want to say you can add language as a qualifier to described at URL. I do it all the time.
Yes. But we have several language links for the same.
You can add more links in described at URL. I do that too all the time.
Let's see if well, this is a good point. I'm not sure if I've juggled enough to see. Well, I'll try that. Whether they will be different states.
Yeah, you can only add one language to one URL. You can add it per reference your statement. So under the described at URL, you'll have grouped line statements. I don't know if you can shove them in properly with quick statements. I've never tried to use language qualifiers and quick statements, but by hand I can just add the language to URLs.
All right. Yeah. Well, anyway, I just wanted to say that I'm not going to. Well, to have them in the source statement will be ambiguous. I will. I would be, to make it short, maybe it might be good that we have a chat after this, and then if that solution would work, I have a feeling that the problem might remain, but I also have a feeling that this might have been solved already, and that I have just tried to bang my head against the wall.
So Jane, maybe you can find some examples you were talking about so that Susanna can look at them.
Yeah, good point. Where do I have an example?
And if you don't find it now, it's okay, right? You can get it to Susanna later, but that might be worth looking at.
Yeah, but I think I can keep my mind to this, so there's still time for somebody else.
Okay, then we have 5 minutes. Antoine, do you want to?
I'm next on the list, and my question is very, very simple. My two questions compared to you. You guys.
Let's do it then.
Me, I'm talking about puppets. So basically, what I have is I have puppets, and I have people that controls the puppets. And I am not sure exactly how the puppeteers should be modeled in my Wikidata item. But for the puppets, it's pretty obvious. But for the puppeteers, are they cast member or are they performers? That would be my first question. Maybe I can share my screen so that you can see. So this. But the notes, I put links in the notes for everything, so you could get see them. So here is this is my show, which is called the Star the Star Keeper, and here I have these are the people that control the puppets. So I call them cast members, but maybe they should be performers. And my puppets are characters. So I would like to link the character to the puppeteer who control the puppet. That's the first question.
Cool, thank you. Does anyone have thoughts on this? Frederick?
Antoine, you're not the only one who stumbled upon this. You're raising the issue of reification between a performer role and a character role, and it's not easy. You could use qualifiers in either of cast members, or, well, first of all, cast member or performer. The practice is not quite consistent, but most frequently cast member tends to be used when there is actually a role to be expected to be associated with these cast members, like a character role in a play, for example. So you could use cast member and then use a qualifier to point to the different character roles that are listed in the play. What you have as a challenge, first of all, here is that you seem to be describing both the performance work and a specific performance, like the premiere of the performance. The growing consensus in the performing arts community within Wikidata and outside of Wikidata at present is that the performance work and the individual performances should be existing as two distinct entities.
Of course.
Something the cast can change over time, but then there are different properties that are expected of the work and of the performance, for example. And also for use cases for data reuse outside of Wikidata, it's definitely the best way to go. So what I would recommend is, first of all, to create a distinct item for the performance work. And by the way, the performance work is not the same thing as the play. The play is one thing, it can have additions and translations. The performance work actually can exist also in multiple language versions, but it is based on the play. Oftentimes they're developed at the same thing, but conceptually they are two different things and they need to be modeled differently, because otherwise down the road you'll stumble upon problems. So play, performance work, performance, all different. Characters, they can definitely be defined in the play. The puppet would be attached to a given performance work, though, because the puppet was created by a puppeteer who's a designer, and designer functions are related to the performance work. Are you still following me?
Maybe not for the last two sentences, but the rest before, yes.
Okay, so the character roles, they would be described in the play item.
Okay.
The puppets, because the puppets themselves have physical characteristics, they are artifacts that can actually have their own item.
Yeah, you have. It's a puppet and it's an anthropomorphic character.
Yeah, good. And so the puppet then would be defined as a distinct item and would be linked to the performance work. Performance work is like what we call in day-to-day language the show.
Okay.
The play is the written work. The show is the thing that was put together by a bunch of designers, directors, performers, and so on. And then the performance is something else. So by separating these into different places, it doesn't create a bit of a nonsense situation where you would describe a cast member and say that their character role was a character role that is described in the same item. It's still not ideal reification. If we were in pure RDF, we could have a blank node, for example, that would point to both the, for a given contribution, could point to both the actual person who's performing and to the character role. But that's not possible in Wikidata. So what I suggest is join the Wikipro Project Performing Arts quarterly meetups and raise your questions with us. We'll be happy to answer them. Check the Wiki Project Performing Arts because we have extensive documentation and we keep expanding it and expanding it. I know that it can feel a bit daunting at first, but anyways, these are my recommendations. Distinct items for the play, the performance work, the performances, and the puppets themselves.
Thank you so much, Frederick. Super helpful, Antoine. I hope you can work with that, and that helps you. And with that, we have to wrap up this session. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope you found at least some answers to your questions. And the next session will be Wikibase Federation and WikiCite in about 7 minutes. See you there.